Hello and good morning. This is Kelsey Jones from Anna Porter Public Library in Gatlinburg, Tennessee. I am the director of Anna Porter Public Library, and I thought now would be a good time to just give you a little bit of introduction about me and why I do these videos. I am a firm believer in book recommendations, especially because it helps you connect with your patrons at your library as well as make connections in your community. And just by recommending the right story to someone, you can really help change their lives. Plus, it's so fun to discuss the books that I've read recently, the books that have really affected me, and I will be doing a book review video of really the books that I've read in this first quarter. And I'm going to be discussing them as well as how I rated them and discuss some of the themes that I've focused on in my reading habits this year. But moving forward, we are discussing today City of Ashes. This is the second book in the Mortal Instruments series by Cassandra Clare. I did enjoy this installment, I think, better because I do believe the characters develop a little more. We get a few answers in regards to Valentine, the villain, and as I've mentioned, the characters develop as well as the relationships to each other. Lots of exciting things happen as well. The world building isn't really quite as strong, but that's because the world has been developed at this point. The characters go through a lot in this book, and because of that, I gave it 4 stars for that, liking it, and a few other things, obviously, that I will be discussing with you today. Now I'm going to kind of just give you a very short synopsis of what the plot of City of Ashes is. Newfound shadow hunter Clary Frey just wishes her life would go back to normal. But the world of demon hunters can't seem to let her go. Plus, her mother is kind of still in a magical induced coma, so she could use their help regardless. As Clary is trying to grapple not only with her newfound existence and with the feelings for her handsome but frustrating brother Jace, she's also in a current relationship with her very best friend Simon, who we met in the very beginning of the book. He was with Clary at the dance club thing. And while trying to not necessarily cope, but learn how to flow with her new life, they are also trying to figure out who is currently murdering downworlder children throughout New York City. And just for those who don't know, downworlders is a term for pretty much anyone that isn't a Nephilim. And Nephilim are blessed by angels. They have angel blood in them that protects them from demons, gives them fast healing powers, things of that nature. An example of a downworlder would be a werewolf, a vampire, potentially. I think fairies are considered downworlders as well. So basically anyone that wasn't given the task by an angel to protect all of humanity and aren't demons are downworlders. So children who are downworlders are being murdered in New York City as well at this time. I mean, they are all under the age of 18, so that's obviously concerning. So not only is Clary and Jace needing to work together to try and figure out what is going on in New York City and to help prevent further murders, Clary is also trying to figure out how to help her mother and how to, again, deal with just everything that has changed in her life in the last, I think it's only been like a couple of weeks between book 1 and 2, I mean, in terms of what is taking place. So that's a lot to unpack in a very short amount of time for Clary, so I was actually pretty impressed with her maturity in this book. And finally, this was not a very short synopsis. Jace is also dealing with a lot of criticism and skepticism because it was revealed that he is Valentine's child, as is Clary. At this point, I want to let all my viewers know that this video will likely contain some spoilers in regards to City of Ashes, as it is the second book in the Mortal Instruments series. I will do my very best not to reveal any of the major spoilers or anything that's really important for book two so that you can actually enjoy your reading experience. Okay, so that's the overall plot line. Downworld children are being murdered. Clary's trying to deal with her life while also trying to deal with her brother Jace, who she has feelings for and is really conflicted about those feelings, as is Jace. And Jace is trying to basically clear his name and assure the Inquisitor, who is kind of like one of the head honcho people of the Clave, like a leader, obviously, of the Clave, that he is not evil. So that's a lot to unpack and a lot to deal with at the ripe age of 17. So overall, I would say that I did enjoy this installment better. I think I've already covered that. I gave it a 4-star rating because the characters seemed to really improve. I thought they were a little more fleshed out than the previous book. New characters were also introduced, and they seem to have a little bit more depth to them than what is typically seen, with new characters. So that was, I thought, well done. They added weight and entertainment to the storyline because a lot of them offered some kind of comedic relief. As I mentioned before, a lot of the characters showed a little more maturity, and that just kind of comes with the territory of being exposed to traumatic events. Clary found out that her mother more or less shielded her from who she truly was. So she is also kind of trying to determine how she feels about that. I mean, I assume it would be a huge obviously huge life altering thing to realize that you were born to help save the world and your mother has been purposefully removing your memories as well as taking away your ability to see creatures that aren't mortal. So obviously she has a lot of mixed feelings about this at the time, but Jocelyn, who is her mother, is still kind of knocked out. So at this point, Clary doesn't really have to confront her, but she's so concerned with saving her mother at this point that honestly, her feelings aren't necessarily quite as touched on as I would have liked to have seen. The setting for the most part remained the same. In the first book it takes place in New York City, and in the second book it also takes place in New York City. I think we end up having a few scenes with the Silent Brothers, but other than that, for the most part, the setting stays the same. The progression of the story at times was a little bit slow, but it was still interesting enough to keep me focused, especially towards the last half of the book, because that's really when things start to pick up and pieces of the puzzle start to kind of be connected and go together. We learn more information about Valentine, what his motives were, what his purpose for this tirade basically was, what his deal is, I guess I should say. He's one of those villains that you want to feel sorry for almost because he's so clearly delusional that he can't see reason, but at the same time you kind of just want them to go away because they just remind you of every terrifying dictator you ever learned about in school. So I think Cassandra Clare did a very good job at writing her characters in this book. They were more explored, so, and they hit close to home, especially the villain. The writing style, again, could have used a little bit of work. I once again ran into some metaphors that didn't really flow, personally, I think, and some of them just didn't make sense, in my opinion. However, as I mentioned, the overall storyline was more entertaining in this one, especially because Clary at this point is trying to kind of accept her place in the world and figure out what that is while also dealing with a sick parent. She's, been relocated to Luke's house, and I don't know if I even mentioned Luke in the first video, but he is her mother's best friend. And a werewolf, and she basically grew up with him as a father figure in her life. So she's staying with him right now. So at least she has like a stable place to stay during the course of the events of this book. Okay, so that was just my overall feelings of the plotline. Now I'm going to just dive in a little more to the characters, and I'm sorry if I sound like a dead horse. I take notes ahead of time for these videos, and I'm trying very hard not to continuously repeat myself. So, just stick with me if you can. Clary, as I mentioned, really grew on me in this installment. She showed so much maturity for a girl who's just turned 16 and who is really kind of had her world more or less fall apart all around her. She doesn't scare from a challenge, and she kind of takes unexpected situations and rises above them. So that was really refreshing to see. She still kind of had this. When I was first introduced to Clary, she definitely had the early 2000s typical female character feel of I'm not like other girls, and that topic I feel like has been covered enough that I don't necessarily need to dive into it, but the basic premise is there's a female character, she's typically more masculine, not interested in feminine things, and because of that she sees herself almost as above girls who identify as more effeminate. However, again, I mentioned that she kind of came off a little bit that way in book one, but I did not get that same impression necessarily in book two. She was more just focused on the challenges that she was grappling with and less on her own insecurities, because there was a lot of that present in book one, and I know that that's very, very typical of young people. I mean, I still struggle with my own self image. I think everyone does. However, again, I didn't really like the message that it's kind of okay to bash on other people just because they have different preferences that aren't hurting anyone. But again, Clary wasn't really written that way in this book. She was more written as a character that conquers all odds, so I really liked her in this book. Simon is probably the absolute best character in this series. I love Simon. He is caring. He is like the original guy feminist in young adult books. Like, really. He definitely was exceptional. He was hilarious. He was smart. Simon also goes through a lot in this book, and that is all I'm going to say because, again, I don't want to give anything concrete or too exceptionally important away in these book review videos, but just know that Simon goes through a lot, and he grew a lot as well, and I already loved his character, so that was wonderful to see. I always felt sorry for Simon too, kind of being caught in between this forbidden love story and, you know, the fact that he has been in love with Clary since they were children, so that was kind of sad to see, especially because at this point in book two, he and Clary are in a relationship. And you do get to see kind of some of the unspoken issues that they are dealing with in their relationship. I feel like Simon became his true self in this book, and once you read it, I really think you'll see what I mean. He's always given people the benefit of the doubt. That's something else I loved about him, and he showed so much resilience. Especially because in book one, he was very hesitant to obviously get involved with this group of tattooed teenagers who supposedly kill demons. So I can understand why he was hesitant at first in book one, but he grew so much in this book, and he really threw himself into every situation that he and Clary found themselves in, and I admire and love Simon till the end of days. Jace, poor Jace. Jace had a little bit of a chip on his shoulder since we were introduced to him, and because of that, it's taken me some time to kind of warm up to him, but for the most part, he has always treated Clary well, and he's kind of like that typical bad boy character who is kind of not really dismissive, but not really attached to anyone outside of his people, his circle, or Clary. She was the first girl he has ever shown, you know, an actual, like, genuine interest in. So it was interesting seeing him kind of try to deal with the feelings that he has for his sister, as well as the accusations against him. He's kind of trying to have to prove his innocence in this book, and he goes through a lot in that process. So he was angry a lot in this book, but he kind of has every right to be. People he's known for years are starting to kind of question him and distrust him, and of course, that would make anyone less than their usual rosy merry selves. And finally, other characters were obviously involved and important to the storyline, but they weren't nearly as central as Clary, Simon, and Jace are, as well as the Lightwood children. But again, they were all important to the installment, and I look forward to learning more about these additional characters as the story unfolds. I have finished book 3. I loved it. It was my favorite of the series, and I gave it a 5-star rating. And I will be doing a book review video of that one probably in the next couple of weeks. As I've mentioned before, I try not to do series back to back to back because I want to give people at least a 2-week time span to try and read it before I do a video about it. So that's my overall review for City of Ashes, the second book in the Mortal Instruments series. I loved the third one as well, and I'm now going to go ahead and start on the prequel series, which I've mentioned you need to read the first 3 of the Mortal Instruments, and then you start on book 1 of the prequel series, which is the Infernal Devices, and the first book in that series is Clockwork Angel. Again, thank you so much for watching today. Your support means the world to me. Giving me suggestions, telling me that you enjoyed a book that I reviewed or I read, you have no idea just how much that brightens my day. So if you can think of anything you would like to ask me or mention to me or suggest, please just comment below, subscribe, and I look forward to next week's video review with you. I hope you have a wonderful Wednesday.